moderator of Christianity Today's flagship news podcast, The Bulletin. We are so glad to have you joining us tonight. Be sure to say hello in the comments and tell us where you're joining us from. Joining me tonight are senior commentator Mike Cosper. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Clarissa.
And editor-in-chief at The Pour-Over, Jason Woodruff. Hey, Jason.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for joining us. Could you tell us, Jason, for our viewers, I'm so used to saying listeners, but I got to switch on Tuesday nights to say viewers. Could you tell our viewers who you are and a little bit about what the pour-over is?
To be fair to you, Clarissa, they listen as well. So both words work.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Hopefully they're listening. I'm sure they're not tuning in just to look at us. Go ahead, Jason.
Yes. So the pour over is we summarize the biggest, most visible news of the day, the same stuff that, you know, your secular friends and coworkers are going to be hearing and talking about and talking to you about. So we summarize that briefly in a politically neutral way and then pair with, again, brief biblical reminders. We're not speaking into events. We're just pairing these politically neutral summaries with foundational Christian reminders. And we do that primarily through an email newsletter. It's also turned into a podcast, and I get to do it full time. So
I love
it's an honor.
Yeah, very cool. You know, my kids have been avid readers of The Week Junior for many, many years. And I was actually thrilled to hear and find out and subscribe to the Pour Over's family version of the news, because as a Christian mom, who works in the news, I'm always looking for resources to be able to talk to my kids about those things. Could you talk a little bit about what that resource is that you offer?
Yeah, decaf, the pour over for families. So we rewrite one major news story a week, rewrite it at like a 6th or 7th grade level, and then pair it again with kind of just foundational reminders to spark discussion. So really, all our commentary falls into one of 4 buckets. Hey, let's remember eternity. Keep the big things big and the small things small. Be humble, open to correction. Love everyone, even that person you're tempted to hate. And to actually respond and take action. And that's we address and insert those things differently in decaf, but that's what we're doing with the pour over. That's what we're doing with decaf, and we love the family focus. So it's lots of fun writing decaf.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love hearing the aims, the ambitions, the goals that you have for your work, because what an amazing support that offers to folks who are trying to wrap their heads around the headlines, but also to families who are trying to translate what they're reading in the news, what they're hearing in the news, in ways that don't totally freak their kids out, or make them want to disengage. Like, this is too big and complicated. I'm not interested in any of this kind of thing. And I'm curious, Mike, does your family talk about the news around the dinner table?
I think because of what I do for a living, they often find the whole thing quite boring. And
mine too.
but so there's far more interest in, you know, whatever Taylor Swift might have posted that particular day, or the latest movie or something like that.
Did you hear she's engaged?
I did.
Yes.
Believe it or
the
not,
pictures are beautiful.
what's amazing is my kids go to a school where they've banned phones. So the shocker in my family was that I was the first in the family to know that the engagement had happened. Because
You're so hip.
broke. I know. I'm just so I'm just so dialed in on all things Taylor Swift, as
Yes.
as you well know. So yeah. Anyway, but what's great is that when they do have questions, or they do have interests, or when some of their friends have questions and interests, I hear from them, and those are always really fantastic conversations.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've been talking about around our dinner table a lot is immigration recently, because I come from a family of immigrants. I have worked with refugees in the past. The immigrant story is really precious to me personally, but I also live in the Boston area. I live near a major city, and while Boston hasn't had the kinds of ICE raids that we have seen in other major cities like Chicago and Los Angeles, we still know that there are folks in our communities who are nervous about going to the grocery store or showing up at work. And so it's been interesting to kind of process that as my kids who go to a very diverse school have to think about these things on behalf of their friends now. And one headline that made me really curious, and I wanted to talk to you guys about it tonight because it sits right at this intersection of two topics that we at the Bulletin have been covering a lot lately: the Trump administration's immigration crackdown and AI. So this week, Politico reported that there's this Dutch activist. He's not here in the US, he's based in the Netherlands, who is using AI to basically unmask ICE agents. So he takes imagery that he gets from videos or from pictures in the news, and he says if he's got 35% of that person's face, he can basically use AI to recreate the rest of it and identify who the person is. And, we have all seen those ICE agents wearing the cloth masks in videos on social media as they're detaining people, arresting people. And Congress is it's interesting to watch how people are responding to this. Some people are saying, hey, the transparency is necessary. Like, if this is your job, you should be willing to be identified. And other people are saying, whoa, this is super dangerous, not just for agents, but for the general public. And so I wanted to talk to you about this because the just the existence of facial recognition in AI, of creative generative imagery in AI is, I mean, it's becoming so common. We're talking about families, like our kids are used to seeing this, using it in apps. What are some thoughts that you might have about this Dutch activist who's basically IDing U.S. ICE agents?
Jason, go ahead.
Oh, I'll start with saying the pour over. This isn't a story that we wrote about in the pour over, so I haven't researched it thoroughly. And even the ones that we do write about, we write about 135 words. So I'm much more interested in Mike's thoughts and wisdom. But I think, I mean, even just thinking through how we teach people to process events, it's like, is this, so the first is perspective, like, how should eternity shape how we think about this? Like, does this matter in 10,000 years? And I think there are certainly, right at the heart of this is just the tension between justice and compassion, and how to, what is all the immigration crackdown? What does that look like? And the AI component is fascinating, and I have no idea. It is. I do marvel at just the ability of the technology, and to say, hey, there's someone random in another country that is taking pictures of these things and then IDing them. It feels like that. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel the tension. Like, if you're an ICE agent, one, some of these people may feel very conflicted about what they're being asked to do. And so then to say we're going to, like, kind of against their will unmask them and force them to personally deal with, and their families to deal with that, rubs me the wrong way. The same, at the same time, the idea of masked people running around and there being less accountability for their actions when this is such a contentious and new thing, that feels wrong. Like, we want to be able to both hold, like, corporately ICE accountable and allow Congress to act and say, hey, was this an overreach, or is this allowed? And, like, on that level, but also hold individuals accountable if they, even within their kind of commission, go too far. So, yeah, it's tough. Mike, you got the answer for us?
I don't have answers, but I think you're on the exact right track, which is that this is a story with some real like human drama and tension in it that ought to sort of resonate with almost anyone. On the one hand, look, we have a grand tradition in American culture of distrusting people wearing masks, right? The villains in like the villains in a lot of our films, the villains in a lot of our stories, are people who wear masks. They're hiding their identity, and oftentimes the superheroes that hide their faces are like these anti-hero types where they're sort of skirting the line between law and lawlessness, right? Like Batman or whoever else. So
And I think during COVID, masks became a symbol too,
right, right.
which complicates it further.
And then after COVID, in the protests that took place over the war in Gaza, masks took on another meaning as well, because students who didn't want to be identified, who were taking part in some of the more vile protests at the University of Michigan, Columbia, some of these other places, where you have these very well documented protests for very anti-Semitic things, that went well beyond protesting the war in Gaza, were being chanted and promoted and all the rest. They began wearing masks as well. They wore COVID-style masks. They wore keffiyehs over their faces, that kind of thing, because they didn't want to be identified by school administrators. Which is why masking is part of the thing that the Trump administration is telling these schools, you can't let protesters wear masks anymore, while at the same time they have ICE agents going out wearing masks because they don't want to be identified on social media and all the rest. I think Jason's right to identify this thought that there are people who don't want to be identified, not only because not necessarily because they're ashamed of what they're doing or something like that. There is the element of these are ICE agents. They report to people. They're given a responsibility, and they have to go and do their jobs.
And
then
they got
want
to feed
go
their
home.
families.
Yeah, and then they want to go home to their families, right? So there is this environment that we're living in. I mean, we just had an episode of the Bulletin drop today where I talked to Elizabeth Newman about this. We're living in this environment where escalating political violence is a very real thing, and a very frightening thing. So you can understand why people don't want their faces broadcast across social media. And at the same time, I think there's this part of me that thinks, look, if you don't want to be identified because you're ashamed of what you're doing, then quit the job, right? That's and to me that's an ethical challenge, and that's a very difficult thing. But it's like, if I had found myself in a position where, I was the spokesperson to a pastor or a political leader or somebody else, where I was being asked to go out in public and say things that I didn't actually believe to be true, which is something that lots of spokespeople do for a career. I'd quit my job. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm being given orders that I find to be unethical or inhumane or part of a larger unethical or inhumane process, the solution isn't wear a mask so you can go home and like drink your shame away with 4 Bud Lights and a bucket of chicken every night, but hide your face so that nobody ever bothers you about it. Like that's no way for anyone. We shouldn't wish that on anyone. If the issue is we're afraid of escalating violence in our culture, well, that's a different set of problems. At the end of the day, I think one of the things that we should think about is that we ought to want the people who are carrying a badge that has the name that represents that they represent us as taxpayers, that they represent the United States of America. We want them to be living and acting in such a way that we're proud of what we see them doing. And if fundamentally that's not happening, which I think is the problem with what's happening with ICE right now, and why these masks are in place, that provokes a whole lot of questions that go beyond the masking. It goes into the kind of core element here. Look, I think last thing I'll say is this: I think our political rhetoric is ridiculous. I I don't love the constant comparisons of Trump to Hitler. I don't love the constant, all the escalating stuff. As Jonah Goldberg often says, we know Trump's not Hitler because we know that Hitler probably could have gotten rid of Obamacare, right? Like, Trump has not succeeded on this. Those are not the kinds of things that Trump is doing. It's a very different phenomenon than all of that. And so we always go to these sort of radical polarizing kinds of things. And yet, what we do see with ICE right now is they're trying to expand this force. They're inviting people of sort of all ages, all educations, everything else to be a part of it. They're allowing them to mask their identities. They're militarizing them. And they're creating a culture of fear around them that is something that I think those who care about human rights and human dignity need to be paying very careful attention to.
So if that is sort of the wrestling that we do around the idea of masking ICE agents at all, let's talk about the facial recognition piece, because
Right.
that's everywhere. um, and, for all three of us, we have a public facing work and our faces are on the internet. You Google Jason Woodruff and there's this picture right there. There is no way to get around this. And as I've thought about the facial recognition piece, I thought of a conversation that we had with Renee DiResta, formerly with the Stanford Internet Observatory, who talked about all of the ways that facial recognition has been misused, predatory images of AI that we're starting to see that really need to be legislated against. And so I'm curious, is facial recognition, the tool itself, the ability to alter an image with AI, is this just kind of like part of modern life that suck it up, buttercup, we got to get used to it, that it's going to be used for some things that are funny and interesting, and then it'll be used for some hurtful things too? Or do we need to have a different kind of posture when it comes to that? What do you think, Jason?
I think we can be opposed to certainly the nefarious uses of facial recognition, and like you're saying, that combined with generative AI and all the trouble that can cause, and making, removing like very illicit like adult content, just even deep fake videos of me saying something that I wouldn't say, and it's like,
Yeah.
I think that's very easy to take just a principled stance and say that's wrong and we should call it out as wrong, and that's violates in many different ways and is deceptive, and Christians certainly shouldn't be involved, but it also is. And to say like it shouldn't be, and let's just legislate it away, like that feels optimistic. I mean, even this story that we're talking about, this is someone in another country using pictures that are publicly available online. Like I don't even know.
You can't put that cat in the
Congress's
bag.
Right. Like I don't even know like Congress's ability to stop this. So yes, like everything that can be done should be done. And also recognizing, I will, all of us will probably be deep faked, if that's a verb, and also it should make us more critical, and bring us pause when we see things. I mean, and thankfully this is a completely innocuous thing, but I was showing my wife this video of all these bunnies jumping on a trampoline, and we were laughing. We're like, "That's incredible," And then it was like we go to the next video, and it's like a hippopotamus jumping on the trampoline. It's like, oh, I get it. Like the joke's on me. Neither of these were real,
Yeah.
and I totally believed the bunnies. Like that was just enough. So, yeah, it will take a whole new level of discernment. And honestly, that is part of the posture of the pour over, is to say, as news has globalized and we're now able to be aware of anything happening anywhere. Um, and the most exciting, biggest thing happening anywhere is way more exciting than anything happening in Iowa right now. And so it's distracting. And it's not like right now, these, to my knowledge, there are not, at least there might be in Cedar Rapids, but like there are not deportation crackdowns super close to me. And that's not to say that like these are not eternally significant or impactful things, and that Christians shouldn't be aware and shouldn't care and be moved and pray, and if they are impacting you, do something. But there's that and 1,000 other things that are happening in the news that are worthy of my attention, and all of them steal my attention from my genuine sphere of influence, you know? So saying, hey, there's a certain level of, I need to trust and rely on the body of Christ as a whole, and say, hey, Christians need to be doing these things that I'm not doing, but I can't personally, I'm finite. I can't do everything. I don't have the capacity to care deeply and act on all these things. And it is okay to do good in your community and trust that God is in control, and the kingdom of God and the church at large are tackling these broader issues.
Yeah,
I think-
go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, I think that's really well said, and I think that's right. I mean, I think one of the things that you see with technology on the web is that things tend to kind of grow really wild, and then sort of coalesce around a few brands, a few ideas, a few different things, right? So there was like the blog era, and everybody had a blog, you know. Probably all three of us had blogs at some point, right? I would guess. And it was this, you know, there were all these different ways to do it and all the rest. And then slowly but surely things began to kind of coalesce into like, well, there's Substack, there's Medium, you know, there's 2 or 3 platforms where things tend to happen. I think something similar is going on with AI right now, and what we're seeing is sort of this sort of wild introduction of, you know, things like the technology that allows you to do the kind of deep research that it takes to identify people. You know, a lot of this technology has like scraped everything published in the last 25 years, and it's so you can do a depth of research inside some of these platforms that would have taken you, like, you can do in a few minutes on ChatGPT what would have taken you hours and hours and hours to do in a library, even with like a good search engine just a few years ago, right? So I think there's, with that comes all the moral and ethical questions on the backside of that, because it's as people use the technology that we start to discover, well, wait, are we okay with them scraping all of our work and incorporating it into these chatbots? Are we okay with the ability to find somebody's face and identify it? I think there's interesting technology that's emerging on, it's sort of based in blockchain technology that's all about identity and verification, where you can preserve your image, you can preserve your the way you're represented online through the blockchain, where certain certifications and things are required. Like if you want to make sure that people know that it's always you, there's ways to do that. There's ways to do verification on blockchain, Web3 kind of technology. That stuff's coming, and I think it's going to change a lot of this, because I think it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to get away with some of the fakery and everything else. But right now it's the Wild West. I mean, I just heard a podcast the other day, Sal DiStefano, this like fitness influencer guy, talking about how he has been hounding Meta, the company behind Instagram and Facebook, because there's these ads that get promoted all over Instagram with his face, his image, his voice, selling supplements that he knows nothing about. And you know, and getting that stuff kind of scraped off the internet. Scott Galloway had the same thing happen to him the other day as well. Another prominent podcaster, NYU professor of marketing. So this stuff is it's the Wild West. But I tend to think not to sound like the raging capitalist, but like I tend to think the market tends to correct for this because people don't like this. People don't like the ability to pry into our lives, and they don't like the ability to be misrepresented by others. And that's all connected, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to point to that, like and I'm just affirming everything you said. It's the Wild West now, but there's a strong economic incentive for Zuckerberg to figure out how to solve that problem, because like it's not just Scott Galloway and the fitness influencer you were talking about that are upset. Like all of us don't like being duped.
No.
And when it comes out that like we're all being like there will be things there's such a strong incentive to solve that I think each one of these individual problems can be solved with the same technology that's causing it. But that brings up all sorts of other like
right.
then you have the power coalescing even more and so
well, Tim Cook recently said that he wants Apple to be known as the most secure technology platform on the planet. And that's because of a lot of this kind of stuff. But like you said, but that means then now that makes Apple way more powerful, and way more in control of our ability to do anything. I mean, I can't do anything without Apple technology these days. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate this conversation for a couple reasons. First, it helps me to think about this headline in terms of what you said right at the beginning, Jason, about does this matter in 100 years? What is the eternal purpose that we are striving for? And in a conversation like this, it directly leads me to a conversation about the image of God, like that ICE agents bear the image of God just like the rest of us, and that they are worthy of respect, and because they inherently reflect God's image. And then also, hey, let's be clear about the things I can control and the things I can't control. And I may not be able to do anything about this particular headline, but I can talk to my kids about the way that we use AI in our family. Or I can consider the ways that I am beginning to rely on AI for shortcuts or productivity or all of the kinds of things, the questions that arise out of these conversations about AI. Because as Mike says, it's still the Wild West. And this gentleman who is the Dutch activist acknowledged that the technology he's even using is flawed. He said that about 60% of the AI generated results that he had led to the wrong matches on social media profiles, and that he had to have humans going through and verifying the process before he posted any of the names online. So there's so much here to think about, that technology, it is like a stream that's always pushing us forward. And sometimes it's good for us as Christians especially to just take a toe out of that stream and slow it down and be able to think deeply and take our time as we consider a headline like this, instead of the sort of knee-jerk reactions that we see on social media. Friends, we are taking your questions here tonight, so go ahead and stick them in the comments. If you have a question for Jason or Mike or me, we would love to hear from you, hear your questions. Please let us know where you're coming from. We're so glad to have you here tonight. As I've been thinking about the news this week, one thing stands out pretty clearly, this new America Praise initiative that we saw President Trump announce this week. It's aiming to bring religion back into various spaces in American life. President Trump has ambitions to get prayer back in schools as a legitimate personal activity of faith expression, and the White House is encouraging prayer, even down to that oldie but goodie of evangelical prayer guidance, the ACTS prayer method. Are you familiar with this, Mike and Jason? Adoration. What comes
Adoration,
next?
confession, thanksgiving, supplication.
There you go. I want to know how many people in 2025 know what supplication actually means. I feel like that's a toughie, but it would ruin the acronym, wouldn't it?
I was going to say, you don't mess with a good acronym.
Yeah.
It was. I only know it from the acronym, but
I love it. Well, that is an SAT word. So perhaps it does belong in schools. So the first thing that I'm curious about was, as I saw the press conference happening, there were a whole lot of people standing next to President Trump. And one of them I recognized, Paula White Cain, who is the head of the White House Faith Office. But I'm curious, Mike, if you could give us a little bit of context. I know that a sort of faith office has been a thing since George W. Bush, really. What is this White House Faith Office, and how are they unique, perhaps from other faith offices of the past?
Well, I think if you look at goodness, I'm trying to hold myself together here. Okay, um, let me just sort of put my cards on the table for our
Okay.
viewers and say I hate this initiative
Oh,
with a
okay.
deep and burning and abiding passion, because I think for lots and lots and lots of reasons. So let me start by answering your question.
Okay.
What makes Paula White Cain's faith outreach ministry different than every other faith outreach ministry that's ever been attached to a White House before?
Hmm.
It's Paula White Cain. Look,
Okay.
this woman is a prosperity gospel grifter, who she was an election denier in 2020. Um, she spent hours at a pulpit screaming in tongues and pounding on the wood and talking about how she saw angels from Africa coming to America to overturn the results of the 2020 election. By the way, P.S., what's really going to help this along is your faith gift of $100 or $1,000 that you send to Paula White Cain, which is going to help make sure that these things happen. Like, like when it comes to religious grift, it's hard to find somebody who's been more successful at the task of religious grift than Paula White Cain has been throughout her career. Um, so that would be the fundamental thing that I would say distinguishes between kind of where we are and where we've been in the past. Um, Look, I think there are two ways we could talk about why we want prayer in schools and why we don't want prayer in schools. One reason we want prayer in schools is because we want prayer in schools. We want people to pray, right? Um, but think of this: the Lord's Prayer comes to us in the Gospels because the disciples go to Jesus and say, "Lord, teach us to pray," right? The question we should ask in a situation like this is, who do we want teaching us to pray? Do we want this administration to be teaching us to pray? Do we want Donald Trump to be teaching us to pray? Do we want Paula White Cain, who understands religion as a transactional relationship between God and her followers and others, in which she can enrich herself through other people's devotion, and get what and they will get what they want. I mean, the nature of the prosperity gospel is that by giving your money generously to God, quote unquote, God's representative, being Paula White Cain, you'll get healed from your cancer, you'll get healed from these things. Or do we want people learning to pray in a context in which the people who are teaching them to pray are people who are representative of the kinds of values we want, and the spirituality we want our children to be immersed in and represented by? There's nothing. I hate to put it this flatly, but I can't see. Look, I shouldn't say it that way. Yes, God draws straight lines with crooked sticks, right? We know this, and God can reach people when the gospel is proclaimed for all kinds of different reasons, including the griftiness of a bad actor like Paula White Cain. But when it comes to what we as Christians should be wanting, one of the reasons we don't want the government involved in teaching people how to pray is because we want them to see prayer, we want them to see spirituality, we want them to see the gospel in the context of the kind of lived religious life that we want to see them actually living. Now, there are definitely lots of people in this country and lots of people in MAGA and probably some people watching this show who are like, well, I want my kid, to be represented by that kind of spirituality, or I want my kid to see MAGA as like the highest calling of, um, you know, Christian religiosity in America today. If that's the case, fine, right? Like I can't argue with you if that's where you stand, but I have a hard time thinking that evangelicals, with the values that we espouse, with the way the devotion we have for the Bible, the way we understand the intimate personal relationship that we're supposed to have with Jesus. I mean, part of what's weird about, if you go read the actual thing that they put out there, it's like Trump understands prayer in the same way that Indiana Jones understands the Ark of the Covenant. It's a source of power and influence and transformation. It's not about access to the grace of God, the mercy of God, the person of God. And I just find it so offensive that this thing is being pushed this way, and that so many Christians are responding to it so uncritically.
One question I had for you, Jason, was how would you talk to your audience about an initiative like this that is overtly Christian? I noticed that there was one Jewish organization that seemed to be supportive of it. There were not any Muslim or Hindu, Buddhist, other religions who seem to be represented, who all have some sort of prayer in their religious custom. How do you talk about an initiative like this that's overtly Christian in a pluralistic society?
Well, my initial
Should everybody
reaction is,
included?
yeah, I mean, so how we talk about anything is very descriptively and briefly. So
That's helpful.
it would, yeah. So like we would describe this initiative saying, you know, the White House or President Trump has signed this initiative. It's called this, and here's what it does, and say something like, you know, there are evangelicals, or Mike Cosper from Christianity Today is critical for this reason, and then try to balance it with a, you know, whatever the alternative perspective is.
Yeah. Samaritan's Purse and the Southern Baptist Convention are two of the organizations, faith organizations that
31 million Baptists disagree with him.
So that would be you'd sort of give both sides, is what you're saying.
Yes, and that
Okay.
is like, it really comes to the heart of what like I started the pour over because I had a deeply unhealthy relationship with the news in 2016, 2017. And one of the things I realized was just like my, I'm a naturally, like throughout my life, I'm a naturally pretty like calm, friendly guy. Like I've never really had the urge to punch people. I had fraternity brothers that would get in like fights like regularly, and it's like, man, what are you doing? You know? But then when I started grad school, intentionally started consuming lots of news. I was like, it's time for me to be an adult and grow up, and this is what like adult, wise, intelligent people do. And I watched myself become like angry and anxious. And so one of the levers that I eventually pulled, and a motivation for the pour over, was to say, I need to separate out the current event and the faith component, and say like, here's what's happening and here's what both sides are saying, because that just doesn't happen most of the time anymore. You know, like it's hard to find any, and so we're politically neutral. I would almost say like we're politically balanced. Like we're not trying to smear over these things. We're trying to represent both sides. And we represent both sides even when everyone on staff is in agreement that one of the sides is utter lunacy, you know, or like is wrong, and say, right, but we're called to love the person. Like that might be your dad, that might be your brother or your coworker, and you're called to love them. And it's hard to love them if you have literally never even heard their side, you know, like you're just in this echo chamber. So that's some of the motivation and how we handle it. I'll say like with something like this, it's it, I think I think Mike like appropriately questioned some of the genuineness of the motivation of like why this is coming, and it is a and also to your point of like God draws straight lines with crooked sticks. I trust in that God will work through this, you know, and will do great things through this initiative, like He does great things and turns evil, overtly evil things to good all the time. So it's I personally, removing the pour over, am supportive of things that allow religious freedom. And to your point, I think this, if the intent of this is to say, hey, church is being banned and forbidden in schools, I love the pushback and to say, hey, no, there's freedom, and kids should not be punished for praying. But also, to your point, that necessarily includes non-Christians, that like Muslims, and like it's religious freedom. It's not Christianity, and obviously I'm pro Jesus and think Christianity is right, but it has never worked well for the church to try to legislate faith in any way. And so that would be my fear with this, is that it starts to move towards, hey, prayer is good. I'm going to do, that means anything with prayer, anything that might lead to more prayer is good. And I think that's a wrong conclusion.
Yeah, there was on the America Prays Initiative website, they had an ask and they had an invitation. The ask was, what if 1 million Americans dedicated 1 hour a week to praying for our country and our people? And the invitation was, will you join with at least 10 people to meet each week for 1 hour to pray for America? And as I was reading through all of the other stuff that was on accompanying pages and whatnot, I kept coming back to those two questions because I was like, that's not me. Like, I don't already fit in that category. And so there was, for me, almost like a chastening as I read that, to think, I don't dedicate an hour a week to pray for my country and our people. And there's a heck of a lot to pray about. Like, I don't join with at least 10 people to meet each week for 1 hour to pray for America. I mean, we pray at church, but I'm not in a small group that is dedicated to doing this. And I wonder, for both of you, this prompted for me this question of like, what do I expect in prayer? How do I pray with expectancy over the news? Because if, you know, the workings out of this prayer initiative are controversial, no doubt, but there is at its core this, I think, a question of expectancy that really struck me. I'm curious what you think about praying with expectancy over the news.
Yeah, I would say a couple things. One is like of course we should want people to gather and pray for their country every week, right? Like there's nothing evil in that notion as that notion stands in and of itself. But the problem is, who do we want teaching us to pray in those moments? Because I think when you ask that question about expectancy, well, what does the Trump administration want to see come out of this? And I think there's a couple of different ways you could answer that question. One way you could answer that question is you could say, well, this is just a cynical effort to like throw a bone to evangelicals and signal that we're on your side, and, you know, say that we want to put prayer in schools and all the rest of it, and sort of at the same time kind of say, hey, we'll believe it when we see it. Maybe it's something else entirely. I mean, you know, Trump has made these interesting comments lately about, you know, how he hopes he gets to heaven or whatever. Maybe he's wrestling with his mortality. Maybe he's asking serious questions about the state of his soul or whatever. And we're all working that out together as a country with him right now. That's very possible. Because one thing we do know about Donald Trump is that he can't hide. He tells us exactly what he's thinking whenever he's thinking it. But another another answer to this is that there is this vision associated with MAGA of a certain kind of United States of America, that America is supposed to look a certain kind of way, and you see this articulated sort of most loudly and obnoxiously on the online right and the Christian right. This vision of like a restoration of like a 1950s America, where every mom is at home, with her pearls baking apple pies, and every dad has his good manufacturing job that provides enough for the family and the kids and everything else. And it's nostalgia, and the truth about nostalgia is, and look, all great literature in the Western canon tells us this. The truth about nostalgia is it's longing for a past that never was. The reality of 1950s America was not that picture that's being held up as like, this is what we want to get back to. This is what, or like as the memes go online, this is what they took from us, right? That's the way that the very online right will often kind of refer to this nostalgic vision and this America that they want to see restored. The problem with this, for me, the problem with this prayer initiative, this idea that we're going to, because so much of it does have this, when you read the site, so much of the rhetoric of it is sort of this, we're going to get back to our roots, in this way. Or you could look at like, and I don't think I'm being paranoid in saying this. I mean, look at Homeland Security's Twitter account. Look at what they've been saying. They've been making reference to this kind of like heritage American understanding of what it means to be American, that plays into white nationalist tropes. Now, whether they're doing that to troll, whether they're doing that to dog whistle, whether they really mean it, like that's another whole discussion altogether. But they're doing it. And to me, this initiative very much fits inside a lot of that kind of ugly signaling for the far, far right. So, so what is the expectation? If the expectation is that the church would gather and pray so that America could have a genuine revival in the spirit of the gospel to make us more repentant, more humble, more concerned about the welfare of our neighbor, more generous to the poor, more embodying the image of Christ to the world around us, that would be a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. That's not what they're advocating. That's not what this is about. This is about, let's make America this vision of America again. And again, it's with nostalgia, that's an America that never was. And it's an America that is primarily defined in grievance based on racial identities, economics, and all these other grievances that are driving the far right now. Sorry, I didn't mean to monologize that long.
That's okay. Thoughts, Jason?
One thought that comes to mind is like this call to an hour of prayer with 10 people once a week. Mm-hmm. It sounds wonderful, and it's specifically praying for the country, and I would say, regardless of this initiative, that is it. We were talking about what can you actually do, and right. One of the things that is so hard when it comes to like, oh my gosh, the country's so divided, or we don't like this administration or that administration, or what's going on. We wrote a whole post recently about like prayers. Like it was after the earthquake in Afghanistan. We got a lot of pushback because one of the things we said to do was to pray, and it was this. So we wrote a defensive prayer of saying like, yes, we are called to pray and do more, and like absolutely don't. If you just see someone who's in need and are like, oh, go be warm and well fed, mm-hmm. like not okay. But also genuine real prayer is powerful and effective. Yeah. And causes things to happen that would not have happened otherwise. And so yes, even removing the intentions and or lack of pure intentions around this initiative. What a beautiful thing if the response was, yes, we're going to do this,
Yeah,
and
people
like,
actually
hey,
prayed. It would be great.
Yeah.
exactly, and like
Yeah.
if this is the, and also again, I'll say, if the Holy Spirit hasn't laid heavy on your heart like this country, and has instead laid on your heart other countries or other issues or more specific or local issues or whatever, you can spend that hour of prayer on those things, and we do not all have to have the same concern, the same issue, the same action. We actually need a diverse body of Christ, that is working on many different things at once, and so. Yeah,
Yeah,
it would
I
be
love
great.
that.
It would be great to pray, and I hope that the country as a whole prays for many different things, including the country that we're in.
And,
Yeah.
and by the way, pretty much every church that's in any way affiliated with Cranmer's liturgical tradition is praying for their country every Sunday, right?
Yes.
And there are lots and lots of free church traditions where, as part of the tradition on Sunday, is that they pray for our nation's leaders, our nations and our local leaders. So I think that's worth mentioning. Like, in the mix of all of this, we need to remember lots of Christians are praying for this country already, and have been for a very, very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that so much. I am in a church tradition that does pray for the government and our leaders. And I've always appreciated that our particular liturgy that we use prays for the president by his, or I guess her at some point, first name. So when it was President Biden, we prayed for Joseph, our president, and now we pray for Donald, our president. And, at first when I volunteered to help with the prayers of the people, I thought it felt kind of casual, like a little maybe disrespectful for a world leader to be referred to by his first name. But as I thought more about it, I was like, you know what? Not only does he put on his pants the same way as I do, one leg at a time, but he stands before God as Donald, just like I stand before God as Clarissa. And he stands before God as Joseph, just as I stand before God as Clarissa. And I appreciated that, the what do they say? The ground is level at the foot of the cross.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder in prayer that as we're praying for our government, that these are not superhumans, that they are fallible creatures just as we are, and yet they're in positions of great power. And so certainly the work that they're doing warrants our attention and our thoughtful prayer, especially in our churches. Our time is wrapping up for tonight, but I want to thank you, Jason and Mike, for joining me. I love to sit on our live streams and just kind of wrestle in real time with some of the headlines that we get. And Jason, your perspective particularly, I think, was helpful to us tonight as we got into some hairy stuff and tried to think about that from a variety of angles. Our churches are filled with...
That's her polite way of saying, as Mike got really worked up and loud over a couple of things.
No, not at all. No, because Jason the pour-over has a very unique perspective that I think is such a gift to us in the church, because
I'm not just a fan of the pour over. I am a subscriber.
I'm
So
a subscriber
thank
too.
you, Mike. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Appreciate
I
it.
mean, it got my kids interested in politics, which is wonderful. To be able to
Is it?
discuss that.
I
Is it?
hope. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
We're
it
not
got,
leading with that accolade, but
No,
that's
it got them interested in the way I hope that they will be interested, which is where we've sort of landed the plane in this discussion of like, what's important, what's eternal, what do I pray about, and how can I be involved in meaningful ways that build community and not tear it apart. And I think so much of our work at the Bulletin is about doing that, talking across the aisle and talking across difference and really trying to build bridges in a season of great polarization. So, friends, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Listeners, viewers, whoever you are, we're so glad you're with us. Please join us on Friday for our next episode of the Bulletin, and go ahead and check out the pour over. Jason's writing it over there along with a great team of folks who are providing prayer points and more really important thoughts on the news.